A very good afternoon to all my dear students. How are you all? I hope you all are enjoying these revisionary classes. And I also hope that you all are taking full advantage of these classes. And now do you all know that how can you take advantage of at least auditing and ethics subject, the revisionary classes that are going on? Very simple technique. You just have to go through the module in entirety before coming, like whatever topic we have covered so far, you have to finish that before coming for the next session. So Bhumika, Ajay have already joined. Others also please join. And students, today we'll be starting with a very important chapter, chapter number 4. This chapter along with chapter number 6 constitute 12 to 18% as per the weightage that is given. So very important and very interesting, very much practical chapter. Again, a very lengthy chapter, but you are going to finding interesting, right? And the learning that you all ask me that, ma'am, how to learn, that is also we are going to discuss as and when the session will proceed. So, and students, before starting with the first topic from this chapter, in the last chapter, chapter number 3, I have left 1 or 2 topics, right? And I have asked you to go through the topics as homework also, some topics as homework. So assuming that you have gone through those chapters, and in case any queries there, you can always send those queries. And the topics that I have left, I'll take them up as and when the relevant related topic will come in chapter number 4, right? So on a very positive note, let us start with chapter number 4, which is audit evidence, right? So send in your replies. What do you understand by the term evidence? Quick reply, right? Evidence. So Om Krishna Om is saying, ma'am, it means proof. Others also please reply. So see, when the auditor is giving his expert opinion on as to whether the financial statement reflected true and fair view or not, this needs to be based on certain proof. And that proof is nothing but what? Audit evidence, right? So see, this is so logical now that if the auditor has to give an opinion, that should be based on something, some proof, which are what? Audit evidence. So let us have a look as to what is the definition of the term audit evidence, and the relevant essay that gives the definition of audit evidence is essay 500. And students, in this chapter, we shall be covering a number of essays from 500 series. Like your essay 501, 505, 520 is there, 530 is there. Then your 610 also relating to internal auditor. So a very important chapter. You can always get practical practical situation based question out of these essays, right? And believe me, though it is lengthy, but this chapter is really very, very simple. And the weightage of this chapter along with chapter number 6 is 12 to 18%. So you must concentrate on understanding and learning this chapter. So right now we are talking about essay 500, which gives the definition of the term audit evidence, right? No, Rick Ghosh, you are not late. He's saying, ma'am, or am I late? No. So we are just starting with the first topic. So audit evidence is the information. See, just keep in mind that what we have understood so far, that when the auditor has to give an opinion, it needs to be based on certain information. So this simple thing will make the definition of the term audit evidence, and a very important definition, as I always say, that the definition of the term audit can be, you can see, you'll see in your exam that somewhere or the other, the definition of audit or audit evidence, right? It will be asked in the question, or there will be questions whereby you can make reference to the definition of these terms. So very important definition. See, when the auditor is giving an opinion, it is based on certain conclusions which he draws with respect to various items of financial statement, and such conclusions are based on certain information that he's gathered. Now let us derive the definition of term audit evidence. Audit evidence is the information used by the auditor in arriving at the conclusions on which the auditor's opinion is based. Now, for all those who tell me that, ma'am, understanding part is clear, but we find learning difficult, see, it is not at all difficult. But yes, you need to understand the concept and then try to learn smartly, right? Because a lot of learning is required in, most particularly in this subject. So I told you that opinion will be based on various conclusions, which will be based on information. So information used by the auditor in arriving at the conclusions on which the auditor's opinion is based, right? So I can write here information, then conclusions, and based on this, what? Opinion. So these are the keywords with respect to your definition of audit evidence as per SA 500, right? Further, it says that, so there are two parts. Further, it says that audit evidence includes information contained in the accounting records underlying the financial statement and other information. Now, let us try to understand what is meant by these two terms. So I hope the definition of the term audit evidence is clear, which is what? Information used by the auditor in arriving at the conclusions on which the auditor's opinion is based, right? Now it includes two type of information. First is what? Information contained in accounting records and underlying the accounting records underlying the financial statements and other information. Let me just take you through your module with respect to this point. See. So information contained in the accounting records. So whatever information is contained in the accounting records can be used as audit evidence, right? So what can be the example? Your records of initial accounting entry, invoices, contracts, right? Then your subsidiary general ledgers, the journal entries, adjustments, right? Records such as worksheets, spreadsheets, computations, allocation, reconciliations. These are the part of accounting records only underlying the financial statement. Based on such accounting records, the financial statements are prepared. So that is why the accounting records underlying the financial statements, right? Accounting records underlying the financial statements, right? And other information. Now, students, quickly tell me, is like there is a document, minutes of the meeting, right? Is that document a part of the financial statement as such? Is it used in preparation of the financial statement? Quickly send in your replies. Or the manuals as to how the accounting system or internal controls will work, are these part of accounting records as such? So the answer is no, right? So other information that authenticates, that validates the accounting record, and also see, since it is validating the accounting record, it is going to help the auditor in having the faith in the truth and fairness of the financial statement. Because see, when let's say there is an increase in the share capital, so if the auditor looks at the minute of the meeting that was held whereby the same was authorized, he can be sure, okay, the special the resolution that is required to be passed, that has been passed, or whatever were the requirements, that has been done. So that is why it says that, and also supports the auditor's rationale behind the true and fair representation of the financial statements. So two purposes that it solves, the other information solves, is what? It authenticates. Authenticates is what? Validates the accounting records, and also it supports the auditor's rationale, because auditor now gains more confidence now that, okay, the same is mentioned in the minutes, the same is mentioned in the written confirmation. See, if any written confirmation is obtained from the external party, the trade receivables or the payables, so is that a part of accounting records or the financial statement as such? No, it is what? Other information. But is this helping the auditor to be more confident about about whatever is shown in the financial statement? So the answer is yes, right? So what can be example of other information? Minutes of the meeting, written confirmations from the trade receivables or trade payables, and manuals containing the details of the internal control, right? Are you able to understand? Are you able to understand? So Swati, whereby my name is written in small letters there, right? So we have understood the definition of audit evidence, and please try to learn also that audit evidence is what the information used by the auditor in arriving at the conclusions on which the auditor's opinion is based, and it includes both the information contained in the underlying record, the accounting records underlying the financial statements, and the other information, right? Clear? Now, the various types of audit evidence, a very simple topic, depending upon the nature and depending upon the source. So, depending upon the nature, it can be visual, like I call it as video, visual, documentary, or your oral. So, these are the learning techniques that you can follow if you don't get confused, right? So, visual, oral, documentary, and based on the source, it can be internal or external, right? So what is meant by visual? So if let's say the auditor is observing the physical inventory count which has been done by the management or the personnel, employee personnel of the entity. So you all know that physical inventory count is the primary responsibility of the management. Auditor will observe it. So when he's observing, visually he's saying this is what visual audit evidence. Oral is what? When the auditor is, let's say, conducting inquiries with the management or any knowledgeable person or any person. So it becomes what? Your another type of evidence, which is what? Oral. Documentary, let's say the auditor is going through the title deeds or the loan agreement. So documentary, as the name suggests, very simple. Based on the source, it can be internal and external. Quickly tell me, is sales invoice an internal evidence or external evidence? Internal to what? Internal to the entity or external to the entity? Quickly send in your replies. Quickly send in your replies. Rick Ghosh, Komalpreet, Bhumika, Swati. All are absolutely correct. Others also please reply. Om Krishna, absolutely correct. Internal, right? And purchase invoice will become what? External. Now, see, students, so it depending upon the source of the evidence, it can be internal evidence, that is the document that is generated internally within the organization, or it can be external, that is which is generated outside the entity. So, let's take another example: confirmation from the debtors or the creditors. These are what? External documents, right? Right, bank statement that have been taken from the bank are what? External document, right? So these are what your types of audit evidence. Now students, see, internal documents are generated internally within the organization, so the chances of their manipulation increases, right? But it does not mean that the auditor will always suspect them, right? Same way, if I talk about external document, since these are received externally, that is from the independent party, right? The chances of manipulation are less, right? But tell me, let's say the third party who is replying, take an example of external confirmation from a debtor, and that debtor who is replying, the person specifically who has given the reply, he has no knowledge about that account balance. So can that external document be more reliable? So the answer is no. So the auditor needs to be very much vigilant, or you can say he needs to be alert when he is using both types of document, and he should try to match the internal documents or the internal audit evidence with respect to the external audit evidence. So let's say with respect to any of the sales, there is one of the internal document which is sales invoice, right? And another external evidence which is, let's say, the confirmation. So he should try to match the internal evidence and the external audit evidence, so, as far it is possible. Sukaina, yes, it is working. right? And Bhumika is saying, ma'am, information underlying financial statement. So basically, students, here she's talking about this point. So information that is contained in the accounting records underlying the financial statement. See, based on the accounting record, the financial statement will be drawn up, right? So whatever information is used there. So have you used minutes here or the manuals here? So no, right? So that is why that information, though that is relevant, that can be used as an audit evidence. So that is why it is contained where in the clause of other information. So Bhumika, is it clear? So we have done the types of audit evidence also. Now, students, if you remember, whenever we say that the auditor needs to obtain audit evidence, we always say that the auditor should obtain sufficient, appropriate audit evidence. What is meant by sufficiency? What is meant by appropriateness? We have had a little discussion in our chapter number 1, though we'll be doing that in detail here. So just try to understand that if we talk about appropriateness of an audit evidence, then it basically means that the quality of the audit evidence, so it is referring to the quality, right? And the quality of an audit evidence is affected by the relevance and reliability. I'm not talking about sufficiency, Abhi. Sufficiency is what? Quantity of audit evidence. I'm talking about appropriateness, which means the quality. And quality of an audit evidence is affected by its relevance and its reliability. That is, whether it is actually relevant for the audit procedure that the auditor is going to perform. It is actually relevant for the assertion that the auditor is going to check, right? And reliability, whether the auditor can rely on it. Let's say auditor is having a number of audit evidence with respect to a particular sales transaction, but he's not having any confidence on those. He's not relying on that. So is it a appropriate audit evidence? The answer is no, right? Same way, let us try to understand this relevance part also. Let's say the auditor has to check with respect to a building. Let's say he wants to check the ownership, whether the ownership is with the company or not. A building is getting reflected in the financial statement. What audit procedure auditor perform? Let's say he obtains audit evidence by inspecting the building. He goes on a round around the building. He inspects the building, right? Now, this gives him confidence with respect to existence of building, existence assertion. I am assuming that now the concept of assertion is clear, though we'll be discussing that here also in the later part of the chapter. So he can be sure about the existence assertion when he's inspecting the building, right? Can he be sure about the ownership of the building also by obtaining audit evidence through inspection of building? So the answer is no. Why? Because if the auditor wants to be sure about the ownership assertion, right, that is rights and obligation assertion, then what he can check, quickly tell me with respect to building, if the auditor has to check the ownership assertion, what document or what audit procedure he should perform? Quickly send in your replies. Yes. Sukaina, Rick, Ghosh, Komalpreet, Swati, absolutely correct. It is what? The title deed, right? Swati, it will be what? Title deed. Right? So, see, relevant for the assertion or the audit procedure that the auditor has to check, right? So, let us now understand in the terms that is given in SA 500. So, what is meant by relevance and reliability of audit evidence? So, as I've told you, that quality of the audit evidence, so whether an audit evidence is appropriate or not, it is affected by the relevance and reliability of the information upon which it is based. Now, what is meant by relevance? Relevance means logical connection with or bearing upon the purpose of audit procedure, and where appropriate, the assertion under consideration. So what is the assertion that I wanted to check here? It was the ownership. So then the audit evidence obtained by performing inspection, will it be a relevant audit evidence? Answer is no. Why? Because if I have to check the ownership, then the title deeds, right? Or let's say the electricity bills. So that the auditor needs to check, right? Is it clear? Or let's say the auditor has to perform certain audit procedures. So the purpose here is what? Performing the logical connection with two things. That is with the purpose of audit procedure and the assertion that is to be checked. So let's take purpose of audit procedure ke liye example, that let's say the auditor has to perform what? The aging with respect to the trade receivables, right? But let's say he has the copy of few invoices only. So will that become a audit evidence, an audit evidence with respect to that particular audit, that particular audit procedure? So the answer is no. Why? Because he need to have a complete detail of all the debtors along with the date also, right? And I said that he is having copies of few of the invoices. So the purpose of audit procedure and the assertion which he is going to check, that he needs to consider, right? Is it clear? Now, with respect to reliability, so the information to be used as audit evidence, this should be what? Reliable. So I gave you an example that with respect to a sales invoice, let's say the auditor is having 5 documents, but he is not sure about the reliability of such documents. So will that be appropriate or the quality will be met? So the answer is no. Now, students, the reliability of an audit evidence is influenced by various factors. The source of audit evidence, the nature of audit evidence, the circumstances under which it is obtained, and the related controls. So, source, whether it is internal or external, and if it is internal, then the related controls, whether those are good or not. See, if the internal controls are not good, and that is an internal audit evidence, then it is going to be less reliable. The nature, whether it is in writing or is it oral audit evidence. The circumstances under which the same is obtained, right? Now, students, if I ask you, tell me, is internal audit evidence more reliable or external? So internally generated audit evidence is more reliable or externally generated? Quickly send in your replies. So absolutely correct. Om Krishna, Sukaina, Bhumika, Komalpreet, Righosh. See, generally, the external documents are more reliable. But tell me, what if the party, the external party, the third party that is replying, that is not interested in giving the, let's say, the reply to the confirmation request, or let's say the third party is a related party of the client organization. So again, the auditor needs to be alert when he's using all such audit evidence. Now, if I ask you, are the photocopies of the audit evidence more reliable or the original? Quickly send in your replies. So, absolutely correct, original, right? And when will the internally generated documents or audit evidence will be reliable? When the same are what? When the internal control with respect to such documents is effective. Clear? Any doubt in this? Tell me one more thing. With respect to any external any confirmation from the trade receivable from the debtor, one situation, let's say a situation, the auditor directly receives such reply from the party, from the third party. And in situation B, the response to the confirmation request is first received by the client and then the client handovers it to the auditor. Quickly tell me, A or B, under which situation the audit evidence is going to be more reliable? Again, so the answer is what? Directly, right? When the same is received directly, right? So with respect to reliability of audit evidence, the reliability, so what is the general rule? So you can say generally it is more reliable when it is received from external party, right? But still there are certain exceptions. So reliability of audit evidence increases when it is obtained from independent party. But I told you that if that independent party, let's say the independent source, that is not willing to reply, or that person is not having the requisite knowledge. So the thumb rule is what? If it is obtained from independent sources vis-a-vis if it is obtained from internal sources. The reliability of audit evidence increases when the related controls are effective, that is with respect to the audit evidence that is generated internally. The reliability increases when it is obtained directly by the auditor, when it is obtained in documentary form vis-a-vis oral inquiries, and when it is provided by the original documents. Simple hai? Is it simple? Let me just show you all these topics, whatever we have covered so far from the module. So we have done this definition of auditing that is given by SA 500. We have seen that it consists of two things. That is what? Information contained in underlying records and the other information, right? And then we did types of audit evidence that is based on nature and source. And then we did a topic that is external evidence is generally considered to be more reliable as they come from third party who are not normally interested in manipulation of accounting information. However, if the auditor has any reason to doubt the independence of the third party, he needs to exercise greater vigilance, right? That is if it is an invoice of an associated or concern or a related party. And so far as practical, he should try to match the internal and the external evidence, right? You can do this illustration 1 and 2, please do them as homework, right? Relevance, we have seen that the relevance means the logical connection with or bearing with to, that is purpose of the procedure and the assertion. Reliability is basically influenced by source, nature, circumstances. So source, nature, circumstances and internal hai to controls over its preparation, right? So this basically talks about test of controls that I'll be taking up later on, and substantive procedure that again I'll be taking up later on. So generalization, therefore generalizations about reliability of various kinds of audit evidence are subject to important exceptions. So the reliability of audit evidence increase when it is obtained from independent source. If it is internally generated, then related control should be gone directly by the auditor, documentary from and the original documents. So contemporaneously means simultaneously. So it basically says that if you are simultaneously, so if you are taking any oral evidence, you need to document it. Again, facimiles, it basically means the exact copies or your photocopies, right? Clear, right? Now, sufficiency and appropriateness. So, appropriateness pe as such, we have had a discussion just now. Now, what is meant by sufficiency? Sufficiency is what? The quantity of audit evidence. Students, quickly tell me, if there is higher risk of material misstatement, if it is high, tell me, audit evidence obtained should be high or less? More or less? Quickly send in your replies. So Komalpreet, Sukaina, Swati, absolutely correct. It should be more, right? So we have seen that sufficiency means the quantity of audit evidence, right? See, audit evidence should be sufficient as well as appropriate. Let's say auditor is having 5 audit evidence with respect to a particular transaction, but the quality is not at all appropriate. So the audit evidence should be sufficient and appropriate. It is not connected by or. It should be sufficient and appropriate, right? So if there is a higher risk of material misstatement, the audit evidence that is to be obtained is more. Obviously, if the auditor assesses that with respect to a particular transaction, there is the risk of material misstatement is high, he'll obtain more audit evidence. Now tell me, if the audit evidence that auditor obtains is appropriate, that is, let's say the quality is very good. So what is meant by this? Let's say auditor receives what original of the FDs when he's checking. So tell me, the quantity of the audit evidence in this case should be more or less. Like, should auditor obtain other audit evidence also with respect to this particular transaction or item of the financial statement? See, when the quality increases, there can be lesser quantity of the audit evidence, right? Clear? But you cannot say that since the quality is less, I'll obtain 4-5 audit evidence, the quantity can be increased. Is it clear? Poor quality will not compromise for the, more quantity will not compromise for the poor quality, right? So sufficiency is the measure of quantity of audit evidence and appropriateness is the measure of quality of audit evidence. Your sufficiency is affected by the auditor's assessment of risk of material misstatement. That is, if the assessed risk of material misstatement is high, audit evidence obtained is to be high. Quality of audit evidence, if the quality is high, the less may be required. Now, what are the factors which affect the auditor's judgment? See whether a particular audit evidence with respect to the particular assertion is sufficient or appropriate. It is again what? A matter of professional judgment. Whose professional judgment? Auditor's professional judgment. Now, when the auditor is determining as to whether the audit evidence obtained is sufficient or not, he applies his professional judgment. While applying his professional judgment, he considers various factors that affects the auditor's judgment as to the sufficiency of audit evidence. Now, quickly tell me what is the essay with respect to essay 320, with respect to materiality. So I have given the answer. So I'll ask you later on. It is essay 320 with respect to materiality. Tell me what is the name of this essay? We have done this. We have learned about this in the last session. Quickly send in your replies. Materiality in planning and performing audit. And audit. Om Krishna Om Komalpreet. Absolutely correct. Others also, please. This is a very simple name. You all must have learned it because we have covered it in the last session, right? Now, what are the factors? Now, tell me if any assertion or the item of the financial statement that the auditor is going to check is material. Quickly tell me the audit evidence will be what? It will be high or less. So, more the materiality. What is meant by materiality? That it can it can influence the economic decisions of the users of the financial statement. So, yes, it is going to be more. If the risk of material misstatement is high, we all have covered this already. So it will be what? More. Now, size and characteristics of population. So these are the 3 points that affects the auditor's judgment as to the sufficiency of audit evidence, which is what? Materiality, risk of material misstatement, size and characteristics of population. Now, students, tell me if the size of the population is small and the items in that population is homogeneous. Homogeneous is what? Your similar kind of transactions are there, right? So the auditor will obtain less audit evidence or more. So the answer is less. Vis-a-vis a situation whereby the size of population is large and heterogeneous. Heterogeneous means different. So let me just explain this to you with the help of an example. Suppose the sales transactions range from 10,000 to, let's say, 50,000. And there are, let's say, 50 transactions. So little or less audit evidence will be sufficient here. Why? Because it is within a particular range. The sales transactions are within the range, let's say, or let me just make it more simple, 10,000 to 20,000, right? Now, vis-a-vis a situation whereby there are thousands of transactions and the transactions varies from 10,000 to 50,000. 50,000 to, let's say, 5 lakhs, 5 lakhs to, let's say, 10 lakhs, 10 lakhs. So with respect to each group, the auditor will have to obtain audit evidence now. So that is why with respect to large and heterogeneous is different. So if the population is large and it is heterogeneous, then the quantity of audit evidence is going to be more. Clear? Is it clear? Homogeneous is what? Similar. And heterogeneous is what? Different. Clear? Any doubt so far? We are on page number 11, 4 point. Just a minute. 4.14. So let me just take you through the module also. So what is the doubt? Let me just have a look. So, Rick, please send your doubt again. I cannot see it. See, there is a doubt of a student that, ma'am, we are not expert in authentication of evidence. Why should we believe them, or there any procedures? See, what I have understood the queries about that audit evidence, whatever the documents the auditor is considering as the audit evidence. So we are not an expert in authentication of evidence, right? But see, students, when the auditor is giving an expert opinion on the financial statement, that is to be based on certain information, right? And as an auditor, we'll check that information. An auditor needs to apply professional skepticism. That is, he needs to be alert all the time. He needs to work with due care and skill, right? He needs to apply his knowledge all the time, right? So he cannot say that he cannot authenticate a document and whether he can rely on that document or not. Audit has to be done. Audit procedures have to be performed. Opinion has to be given. Yes, this is not an investigation, or auditor cannot be expected to, see whether a particular document is forged or not. Unless and until auditor hasn't applied due care and skill, he cannot be held responsible. So our responsibility as an auditor is that we need to apply our professional skepticism, professional judgment, and we need to conduct the audit with due care and skill, right? Because auditor will have to give an opinion and that will be based on the information only. So at each and every step, auditor cannot say that I cannot authenticate this document, right? So far as auditor's work is concerned, he need to be alert. He need to work with due care and diligence all the time. Yes, Sukaina, you are correct. More material the transaction is, more audit evidence. Same way, risk of material misstatement is high, more audit evidence. Yes, Righosh, you are clear, right? Whatever you have said is clear, and he's saying it is clear now, right? So wherever we were discussing about these factors which we have discussed, right? Now there is one paragraph on your page number 4.12. Tell me, what are the sources of audit evidence? See, auditor has to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence. So you tell me, does an auditor obtain audit evidence by performing audit procedures? I'm on page number 4.12. So the answer is yes, right? Now tell me, can the auditor use the audit evidence that he has obtained in previous audit? So the answer is again yes, but he has to see what continuing relevance, that is whether that audit evidence remains to be relevant this year also or not. Can the auditor use the management's expert work? We will be doing this topic in detail later on. So here also the answer is yes. That is, if the entity has used the work of any expert, let's say any civil engineer or environmental engineer, and that work has been used for preparation of financial statement. So can the auditor also use that as an audit evidence? So the answer is yes, right? Now, see, auditor will obtain various audit evidence that will support or corroborate. Corroborate is what? Support each other, right? And there will be many audit evidence when they contradict various things. For example, if the auditor, let's say, got a confirmation from the third party and it is contradicting what is mentioned in the financial statement. So audit evidence will support other audit evidence. Audit evidence will contradict other audit evidence also. See, these points are relevant from your MCQ point of view. That is why I'm discussing this paragraph. Tell me, is absence of information also, can absence of information be also considered as audit evidence? Absence of information. So the answer is yes. Let's say the auditor asks the management that management, please give me in writing. So we will be doing a essay 580 on written representation. That auditor, please give, management, please give me a written representation with respect to so and so aspect, and the management refuses. Now this becomes what? and audit evidence. So absence of information, for example, management's refusal to provide a requested representation is used by the auditor and therefore also constitutes an audit evidence. So here, see, audit evidence comprises information that supports and corroborates management assertion and any information that contradicts such assertion. So audit evidence which supports the whatever is mentioned in the financial statement, which contradicts whatever is mentioned in the financial statement, and absence of information is also what? It will also constitute audit evidence. Quickly go through this illustration number 3, then we'll proceed further. We are on page number 4.13. So there was a partnership firm of chartered accountants, VM and Associates. Mr. M, one of the partners of VM and Associates, while explaining to his team member about importance of audit evidence, informed them about the sufficiency and appropriateness of audit evidence. Mr. A, one of the members of audit team of VM and Associates, was of the view that sufficiency of audit evidence means simplicity of audit evidence and appropriateness of audit evidence means the ease of obtaining audit evidence. Explain whether sufficiency and appropriateness of audit evidence means simplicity and ease of obtaining audit evidence. So the answer is no. Why? Because sufficiency means the quantity and the appropriateness means the quality. Simple. These 3 factors we have done. And this source of audit evidence also, this is related to these topics only, that from where it can be obtained. So this also we have done. Just read it as a homework. If there will be any doubt, I'll definitely take that up in the next session. Now, very interesting topic is what? Audit procedures. So students, if you remember when we were doing our last chapter, then we have done just a minute. We have done this table or this flowchart that audit procedures can be risk assessment procedures. What is the essay number? Quickly send in your replies. Quickly send in your replies. See students, whenever I ask you to send the reply, this shows as to whether you have understood the last chapter, you have learned the last chapter. So that is why I always try to ask you questions. So this was what? Audit procedures, and this is what? So I can see Rikhosh, Bhumika, Swati, Om Krishna, Sukaina, Komal. No, Komalpreet, check your answer. Risk assessment procedures. This is essay 315, right? Essay 300 is related to what? Your planning. Right? Now, see audit procedures. See what will auditor do to perform, what will auditor do to obtain audit evidence? He'll perform audit procedures. Now, the audit procedures like inquiry, like external confirmation, like recalculation of something, right? Or you can say analytical procedures that we'll be doing later on. So, and others also. So these are the procedures that the auditor performs. And if he performs them in context, in whatever context, like if he's performing inquiry for identifying and assessing the risk of material misstatement, so at that moment, that inquiry will be termed as risk assessment procedures. If he uses that audit procedure, let's say, to test the internal control, then that inquiry will be termed as test of controls. And if he uses that inquiry to, let's say, check any transaction in detail, or let's say a recalculation, he performs recalculation. So now that becomes what? Test of details or what? Substantive procedure, right? So the audit procedure more or less are going to be same. But the context in which they are being used, that is going to define their basic nature, right? Now, auditor performs risk assessment procedure under SA 315, that is identifying and assessing the risk of material misstatement through understanding the entity and its environment. After performing risk assessment procedure, auditor is able to assess, identify and assess what risk of material misstatement. In order to respond to that risk, auditor performs further audit procedures under SA 330, the auditor's responses to assessed risk. Further audit procedures can be what? Test of controls and substantive procedure. And this we have discussed in quite detail, that if the auditor here decides that I'm not going to rely, based on my understanding of SA 315, I'm not going to rely on the internal control, the auditor may not perform test of control. But yes, when the auditor is giving an opinion, he will have to perform what? Substantive procedures. And that is up to the auditor's professional judgment, that whether he'll perform test of detail or whether he's going to perform substantive analytical procedure or both. Is it clear? Is it clear? Now, what is the topic that we are going to study? We are going to study about the various audit procedures that the auditor can perform. Clear? Is it? Are you able to understand? So, the mnemonic that I use for understanding these procedure is ICAI ORR. That is my mnemonic. If you find it comfortable, you may use it. If you get confused, you may ignore it. So, I for inspection, C for external confirmation, A for analytical procedure, I for inquiry, O for observation, R for reperformance and recalculation. Right? So let us discuss all these procedures one by one. So first is what? Your inspection. See, when the auditor is performing, he has to obtain audit evidence. He may perform inspection. And when he is inspecting, he may inspect the documents or he may inspect the assets. Like the way we took the example of building, auditor is inspecting the building, right? Or he may inspect the documents. Let's say he's inspecting the title deed. Now, this document can be internal or external, right? And whether that document is reliable or not, it depends upon what the source of the document and the, let's say if it is internal, then upon the control over such documents. Simple, right? And as we all know that, let's say the auditor is inspecting the building. So that way, when he's inspecting the building, he'll get the confirmation with respect to, or he will get the comfort on existence assertion, but not on, let's say, valuation or ownership assertion. So here he needs to inspect what? The title deed. And valuation ke liye, let's say he needs to inspect what? The depreciation schedule, right? So auditor needs to see as to what inspection he needs to do according to the circumstances, the assertion that he needs to check. This is what? Inspection. Simple. I'll take you through the module. First, let us try to understand the basic nature of all the terms. Now, next is what? Observation. See, whose responsibility is to get the physical inventory count? It is the management's, right? What will auditor do? He will observe such physical inventory count. That is who he will look at such process. So what is the definition of the term observation? Looking at the process being performed by others, right? Now tell me, if you all are giving a test, right? And you all are aware that I'm not observing you. So you may resort to some unfair means also, or maybe some other student, you will not resort to unfair means, other students. Now, let's say a student is there and he's aware that he's been observed. So tell me, he will follow the rules and regulations only when he's been observed, right? His behavior will change at the time when he's observed. And when the teacher is observing that student, that observation is limited to that point only, na? How can the teacher be aware that what happened earlier or what happened later on? So these are what certain limitations with respect to observation. Same way, when the auditor is observing the, let's say, the physical inventory count, which has been done by the management's personnel. So the results are limited to that point only. So at that particular point of time, the physical inventory count was done properly. But what before and after? Further, the fact that the employees who were conducting the physical inventory count, they were aware that auditor is observing us. So they are going to follow or abide by all the rules and whatever instructions are there. So this is one of the limitation with respect to observation process. Clear? So this was about observation. External confirmation. So Abhi, I'm just telling you what is meant by external confirmation. We will be doing this in detail in this chapter only when we will cover essay 505. So the auditor, let's say in order to obtain audit evidence with respect to trade receivable, he may send a confirmation request to the third party trade receivable debtor that please tell me what is the balance of my client in your books, or tell me is the balance of my client rupees 5 lakhs. So the third party, the debtor is going to reply. So this is what he's externally confirming from the third party, right? Recalculation. So let's say the company or the management has asked the employees to prepare depreciation schedule. Now the auditor is recalculating the depreciation amount. So this is again another audit procedure. Reperformance. Let's say one of the internal controls that the organization implements is preparation of bank reconciliation statement every month. When the auditor himself is preparing such bank reconciliation statement, which was earlier performed by the management or the employees, it is what reperforming. Simple. Analytical procedure. We will be doing this in detail when we will be covering essay 520. But as of now, just try to understand that when the auditor is analyzing the relationship between the financial and non-financial data, he's analyzing various ratio. He's analyzing the trends, comparing them with the previous year, comparing them with the industry. This is what all analytical procedures. Okay? Abhi I'm not doing this in detail, right? Okay? Then inquiry. When the auditor is asking the knowledgeable persons, both it can be within the entity, outside the entity, right? It can be related to financial information as far as non-financial information. So this is another audit procedure, which is what? Inquiry, right? Now quickly tell me, is inquiry alone a sufficient appropriate audit evidence? Can inquiry alone provide sufficient appropriate audit evidence? Quickly send in reply. So the answer is no. So I've got quick replies from Komal Preet, Om Krishna, Swati, Bhumika, Righosh, which is absolutely correct. See, if inquiry would have been sufficient and appropriate audit evidence, then the audit would have been very easy. Na? I would have inquired from the management. Okay, management, tell me whether the financial statement reflect the true and fair. Management would have said yes. Or tell me whether the building is the amount of building that is appearing, whether it is correct or not. I have inquired from the management. Management said yes. And with respect to other aspects also. So along with inquiry, the auditor needs to perform other procedures also. For example, when he's inquiring, he may observe also. So if the auditor is inquiring the management, that management tell me whether the physical inventory count is been conducted as per the instructions that are given by that have been given to the employees, or whether it has been conducted regularly. Auditor can observe also. When the auditor inquires the management, tell me whether the BRS has been performed, he may reperform it, right? So auditor will have to what? Perform other audit procedures also along with inquiry. And this is a very important topic, that whether inquiry alone provides sufficient appropriate audit evidence. You may get a situation that so and so is the auditor of the company, and while conducting the audit, he inquired the management. Based on that inquiry, he concluded that that particular aspect is showing true and fair view, which is not correct. Why? Because inquiry alone cannot provide sufficient appropriate audit evidence. Is it clear? Let me just take you through the module and then we'll start with the next topic. So this we all have seen. Audit procedures. This nature of audit procedure, please read this as a homework. Page number 4.19. Risk assessment procedures, you all know that risk assessment procedures are the audit procedures performed to obtain the name of SA 315 as it is, understanding the entity and environment to identify, assess risk of material misstatement at the financial statement and assertion level. So a little bit name of the essay is there, right? Further audit procedures. So it can be test of control, it can be substantive procedure. So test of control when required by essay or when the auditor has chosen to do so, and substantive procedure including test of details and your substantive analytical procedures. Test of details further consist of what? Your vouching and verification, right? Now further audit procedure, test of control. What are test of control? These may be defined as the audit procedures designed to evaluate the operating effectiveness of controls in preventing or detecting and correcting material misstatement at the assertion level. We have already covered this definition in detail in our chapter number 3. Substantive procedures. Substantive procedures are designed to detect. Now, this is something which we are going to discuss in detail in this chapter about substantive procedures, right? So substantive procedures are designed to detect material misstatement at the assertion level. They comprise of test of details and substantive analytical procedures, right? So after the auditor performs a test of controls, in case he intends to rely or he decides to test the controls, then auditor checks, he examines the financial statement by performing various procedures, which are called what? Substantive procedures, right? Just a minute. Procedures. Sorry, I've left that 4.1. The audit procedures are given here on page number 4.16. So, inspection. So now, students, you can always get a 3-mark question. What is meant by inspection? Or you may get a situation that the auditor is performing so and so. What is this procedure? Explain. So the definitions, I always say that try to learn the definition by picking up the keywords. So what are the keywords? If you remember inspection में I told you that documents का होता है, assets का होता है. Documents can be internal, external. It can be in paper, electronic or other form. And in the reliability depends upon what? The source, the nature, and in case of internal, the control. This is what we have discussed. See, this is written here and how you can summarize. Inspection can be with respect to your documents, with respect to your assets, examination of assets. Documents can be your internal, it can be external. Again, just a minute. So you can write like this. Documents का हो सकता है, assets का हो सकता है. Documents can be your internal, external, or another can be what? It can be in paper form, electronic form, or other medium. And the reliability depends upon what? The source, the nature, and the controls in case of internal. And what is the example? I gave you example of inspection of tangible assets may provide reliable audit evidence with respect to their existence, but not necessarily about the entity's rights and obligations or valuation of assets. Inspection of individual inventory items may accompany by the observation of the inventory count. Clear? Do this illustration as a homework. Abhi, I'm giving you all the illustrations as homework. Observation. So what is the keyword here? Looking at the process being performed by others. We took example of inventory count and we saw that there is a limitation. So observation provides audit evidence about the performance of a process or procedure, but is limited to the point in time at which the observation takes place, and by the fact that the act of being observed may affect how the process has been performed. Clear? External confirmation. So an essay 505, you can write that we'll be doing it with essay 505. And an external confirmation represents audit evidence obtained by the auditor as a direct written response to the auditor from the third party in paper form or electronic form or any other media, right? So I'll take this up in the later on. Recalculation consists of checking the mathematical accuracy of documents, and this can be performed manually or electronically. Reperformance. Auditor's independent execution of procedures. Auditor, he's independently performing some procedures that were originally performed as part of entity's internal control. I gave example of BRS or reperforming the aging of account receivables. See, preparing the aging schedules of account receivable, account payables. This is again what part of internal control implemented by management. Analytical procedures, SA 520, when we'll discuss that there. Inquiry. So inquiry can be seeking information of knowledgeable persons. Will you ask the peon of the client organization? No, knowledgeable persons. Financial as well as non-financial within the entity, outside the entity. Now, for all those who tell me, ma'am, we find the language difficult. Is it a difficult language? Yes. Remembering the topics, picking up the keywords is what is required. So, seeking information of knowledgeable persons, financial information as well as non-financial, within the entity, outside the entity, right? Right? Is it clear? So, see, very important paragraph. Although inquiry, I am on page number 4.19. Although inquiry may provide important audit evidence and may even produce evidence of the misstatement, inquiry alone ordinarily does not provide sufficient audit evidence of the absence of a material misstatement at the assertion level nor the operating effectiveness of the control. Inquiry needs to be done with along with in a combination with other procedures. This we have done in chapter number 3 also, right? So this I have given you as a homework. Risk assessment procedures, further audit procedures we have done. Substantive procedure include test of details and substantive analytical procedures. Now we are on page number 4.22 and I want you all to read this test of your understanding 1 and without looking at the answers given at the back, please tell me what should be the correct answer for this test your understanding. On perusal of financial statements of a company, auditor of company finds that notes to accounts contain aging of trade payables in accordance with requirements of Schedule 3 of Companies Act 2013. The accountant of company is responsible for ensuring proper aging of trade payables included in notes to accounts. The auditor wants to verify whether aging of trade receivables made in financial statement is proper or not. Identify what he is trying to do. Tell me the exact procedure. Audit procedure to hai na, but what audit procedure? The name of the audit procedure I am asking you. How can it be inquiry? Students, please read this question carefully. It is such an easy question. See, the accountant of the company. So it is saying that on perusal of the financial statements of a company, the auditor of company finds that notes to account contain aging of trade payables. The accountant of company is responsible for ensuring proper aging of trade payables in the notes to account. So this is an internal control implemented by the management. The auditor wants to verify whether aging of trade payables made in financial statement is proper or not. What he's trying to do. See, he's reperforming now. Something has been done by the management or the employee themselves. Now he's reperforming it. See, the context in which it will be used will tell whether it is test of control or test of details. But if I talk about the specific audit procedure, it is what? Reperformance. Is it clear? So let me just read the answer that is given at the back. Just a minute. So it is on page number 4.139. The auditor is verifying aging of trade payables. He is reperforming the control which was mandated by the management. So is it clear? So many of you have written test of controls. But if I ask you about the specific audit procedure, it is what? Reperformance. Read test your understanding 2 also. So this is the question whereby I was saying that number of times you get practical based question on this topic. CA Surya Gayatri is conducting audit of a entity. During the course of audit, she has made oral inquiries from head accountant regarding preparing of bank reconciliation every month, as has been laid down by the management. Discuss whether inquiries as stated above would provide satisfaction to her that controls in respect of preparing bank reconciliation have operated effectively. So basically it is saying whether inquiry alone can provide sufficient appropriate audit evidence. So the answer is what? No. It must be accompanied by what? Other audit procedure. So it is saying that I'm reading the answer given on page number 4.139. Inquiry alone ordinarily does not provide sufficient audit evidence of the absence of material misstatement at the assertion level, nor of the operating effectiveness of the control. Mere inquiry does not lead to obtaining of sufficient appropriate audit evidence. In the instant case, the CA should verify whether proper bank reconciliation have been carried out monthly as stipulated by management. Only then she can be satisfied about operating effectiveness of the control in this regard. And Bhumika, Rick, Swati, Om Krishna, you all are absolutely correct. Now test your understanding 3, which is given on page number 4.23. Quickly read this and tell me the answer. A company has stipulated a control that reconciliation of its records showing quantitative details of PPE are carried out at regular intervals with physical verification of such items. So there is a control, internal control. The auditor has found that such reconciliation are being carried out as stipulated as was required. Discuss whether above factor increases reliability of other internally generated evidence within the company relating to existence of such item. So auditor has a comfort that yes, the internal control with respect to this particular item is operating effectively. So is this going to increase his reliability? So the answer is yes. So I'll just read the answer given on page number 1.39. So Sukaina, Swati, Righosh, Komalpreet, absolutely correct. The management is carrying out reconciliation of items contained in PPE. It means that control in this regard have operated effectively. The reliability of audit evidence that is generated internally is increased when the related controls, including those over preparation and maintenance imposed by the company, are what? Effective. So the answer is yes, right? Is it clear? Now, the next topic that is given is what? Assertion, which we have discussed in chapter number 1 also, earlier chapters. Just a minute. Right? And we will be discussing this topic in detail in chapter number 5 also. But here I'll discuss about assertions. Just a minute. So far as the understanding of this chapter is required. So audit procedures we have seen, this we have seen. Just a minute. Now tell me, what do you understand by the term assertion? Quickly, in a line or two. So can I sing representations by management? Others also, please reply. See, when the auditor, he has to give an opinion, how will he do? He will check certain information. Who has provided that information? It is the management. So management has given certain information. Auditor is going to check that information. That information which is given is what? Basically the assertion, right? So when we look at the definition of the term assertion, let us just divide it into two parts. That is, some work has been done by management on which some work the auditor is going to do. So representations by management, explicit or otherwise, that are embodied in the financial statement as used by the auditor to consider different types of potential misstatements that may occur, right? So these are the representations. Representations, that is basically what? Declarations. So I've written here. So declaration, right? By management. Explicit is what? Expressly mentioned. Or otherwise is what? Implied. And where is this information given? Embodied in the financial statement. Included. So assertion is what? The representations by management, explicit or otherwise, that are embodied in the financial statement. Now, if the amount of building is explicitly mentioned to be 10 CR, it is what? Expressed here, right? Now tell me, is it written that this building exists? We have the ownership. Are these words written in the financial statement? The answer is no. So these are what? Implied assertions. These are what? Implied assertion. And where is it written? In the financial statement itself. So I hope the first part is clear. Representations by management, explicit or otherwise, that are embodied in the financial statement. Now that only representation the auditor is going to check, right? So as used by the auditor to consider different types of potential misstatement. Why potential? Potential means what? Likely. Be it is not sure, the auditor is not sure whether misstatement is there or not. So to consider different types of potential misstatement that may occur, the term may here is very important, right? So representations by management, explicit or otherwise, that are embodied in the financial statement. Second part says, as used by the auditor to consider different types of potential misstatement that may occur. So let's say the building of 10 CR is shown in the financial statement. Now, auditor is going to assume that management, when the management has shown a figure of 10 CR against the building, what assumptions the auditor is going to take? That such a building is being owned by the company. Such a building actually exists. The valuation is accurate, right? The presentation and disclosure is accurate. Are these things mentioned? No. So these are what? Implied assertions. But the auditor is going to assume those and he is going to check those. He is going to use this now that, okay, this building is owned by the management, by the entity. Let me just check it. Okay, this building exists. Let me just check it. How will he do? By performing audit procedure. Ownership देखना है, title deed check कर लेगा, existence देखना है तो he may inspect the building, right? Same way, amount of 10 CR is expressly given. So expressed assertion is there. So he may just check that by checking the depreciation schedule and other documents. Is this clear? The way I always tell you that definition of audit, audit evidence, these are important. The definition of the term assertion is really very, very important. See, if and the concept of assertion is also important. So if you just consider yourself in a situation where whereby you are checking, you are a part of the audit team, right? The engagement partner have asked you that, okay, come here and you are supposed to check the, let's say the building, right? Now, if specifically he asks you that, listen, you have to check the ownership and the existence of the building. Now, when you are aware that, okay, these assertions are to be checked, the documents, the audit procedures that you are going to perform will come automatically to your mind. Acha, ownership check karna hai, I'll check the title deed. Acha, existence check karna hai, I'll just inspect that building. So it simplifies the work for the auditor also, or the audit team also. So once you are, see student, the concept of this assertion is important from the practical point of view, as well as in fact for your understanding from the examination point of view also. Why? Because when we'll be starting chapter number 5, you will see the entire chapter is based on this single term of assertion. right? And we have seen it in earlier chapters also. From the very first chapter, this term has been used again and again. And this definition is really very important. I hope you are able to learn this definition. I'll not say that this understanding will help you in learning. I want you all to reply whether you have learned this definition here only. See, I've told you a very simple concept. Just try to divide this definition into two parts. Some work management has to do on that works, on that thing. Some work auditor has to do. So representation by management, explicit or otherwise, that are embodied in financial statement, as used by the auditor to consider different type of potential misstatement that may occur. So I won't proceed further. Tell me whether you are able to learn also. So Swati is saying yes. Others also please reply. Om Krishna Om is saying yes. Sukaina is saying yes. Bhumika is saying yes. Komalpreet, Rick Ghosh, they are saying yes. So that is good that students, you all are replying. So please try to, learn also side by side. So this was with respect to the definition of the term assertion. So here we'll do one thing. We'll take a break of 10 minutes here, and after the break we will discuss this topic of assertion. And today I want to start and complete essay 610. So be back within 10 minutes. Let's take a break of 10 minutes here. IT, shall we start? So students, I hope you all are back after the break. So we were discussing about the topic of assertion. So the assertions can be about class of transactions or events, account balances, or the presentation and disclosure. So let us try to understand this account balance wala topic. That is, I always give this example, building of 10 CR. So the assertion with respect to such account balance can be what? That this amount, this building exists. That is what existence assertion. How will auditor verify it? By performing inspection of that building as an audit procedure. Rights and obligations, so that the company is having the right ownership over that building. So right is with respect to the assets and obligation is with respect to the liabilities. How will auditor verify it? By performing the audit procedure or what? Inspecting the title deed. Completeness, whether all the buildings that were supposed to appear in the financial statement is coming. So auditor can perform various procedure, like he may ask the management to provide him with the schedule of PP, the depreciation schedule. He may ask the management to provide for a written representation that all the asset side items that were supposed to be there in the balance sheet, whether they have been included or not. Written representation SA 580 will be covering on later on. Valuation and allocation. So whether the valuation is correct or not. So he may recalculate the depreciation schedule, right? He may check the other documents relating to the calculation valuation of the building. So see, these are what? Assertions which the auditor is going to examine. How? By performing the various kind of audit procedure. So I can say with respect to the various balance sheet items, assets and liabilities, these are the assertions for account balances. Same way with respect to classes of transactions or events. So let's say with respect to sales of, let's say, 10 lakhs. So now you will not say that this sales existed during the year. The term that can be used is what? This sale occurred during the year. So auditor will check whether these sales have actually occurred during the year. Completeness, whether all sales have been included in this 10 lakh. Auditor will perform audit procedures for that. Accuracy. So here the term was what? Valuation. So here is what? Accuracy, measurement with respect to the sales amount. Cut off, that is whatever sales has been reflected that pertains to the correct accounting period. It is not happening that the sales of the next year or the sales of the previous year are included in this year. Cut off, that is relating to the correct accounting period. Classification, the sales that have been shown that should not pertain to any indirect income, right? Classification is correct or not, and the way the classification is required, it has been given or not. Similarly, with respect to this, there can be what? The assertions relating to presentation and disclosure, that whatever has been presented and disclosed, the company is having rights and obligations. All completeness of presentation and disclosure is there. The classification and understandability as required by, let's say, Schedule 3 to the Companies Act has been done, and whatever has been presented or disclosed is accurate or and the valuation is correct. So these are the various kind of assertion with respect to the classes of transactions and events, account balances, and presentations and disclosure. And as I've told you that chapter 5 may will be again discussing this topic. So for the purpose of this chapter, I hope this this topic is clear. One thing I would like to ask you to do is go through this topic of assertion from page number 4.23 till page number 4.27 as a homework, and in case you find any doubt, we can discuss. Now there is one point that I want to discuss about negative assertion or implied negative assertion. See students, the way I told you, assertions can be what? Explicit or implicit, that is explicit or otherwise, that is expressly mentioned or implied. There can be negative assertion also. So if in the notes to account, it is mentioned that there is no contingent liability, it is what? Negative expressed assertion, because this no contingent liability is specifically mentioned. So negative assertions are also encountered in financial statement, and the same may be expressed or implied. We are on page number 4.27. For example, if it is stated that there is no contingent liability, it would be an expressed negative assertion, right? Now take an example where in the balance sheet, building is not coming. Building, the term building, building is not coming, no amount is coming. So this is what? Negative implied assertion that there is no building. On the other hand, if in the balance sheet there is no item as building, it would be implied negative assertion that the entity did not own anything, any building on that balance sheet date. I hope this is clear. Otherwise, these examples beautifully explain as to what is the concept of assertion, and we have discussed in quite detail. These examples will only help you in better understanding this concept. But for that, you will have to go through this topic from page number 4.23 till page number 4.27, and otherwise also you are required to read the module till where we will be covering today. Clear? Now the next topic, which is at the last line of 4.27, which is audit trail. Quickly tell me what is meant by audit trail. Quickly send in your replies. If you remember, when we were doing automated environment in the last chapter, I discussed something about this also. Audit trail. See, so audit trail is a documented flow of a transaction. So let's say there is a sales transactions. So from the first element of this transaction till the last element, when this transaction was initiated, till the moment the transaction comes to an end, all the flow of the transaction, the documentation of that is what? Audit trail. And it is used to investigate as to how the source document gets translated into accounting and which further gets translated into financial statement. See, if there is a sales agreement, then how the same gets posted in the accounts and how it is getting reflected in the financial statement. The entire trail, end to end trail, right? And it is used at audit evidence with respect to the authentication and integrity. See, if the auditor has information with respect to or a documentation with respect to the entire flow transaction, this is going to increase the authentication. It is going to validate that transaction and the integrity of the data. See, the way the users activity are maintained by banks. For example, whenever you log in, whenever you enter the password, so the entire trail is there, that when and how many times the login attempts were made. So that is what? Trail. So step by step record of accounting of trade details and other financial data, and so that everything can be traced from the source. Now, there are certain advantages of this audit trail. There are certain disadvantages also with respect to these audit trails. So what are the various positive points with respect to the audit trail? Quickly tell me. Quickly tell me what in your understanding can be the benefits. I'll wait for one or two replies, then we'll proceed. Fraud can be detected, data security, evidence, yes. So see, audit trails act as record keepers that document the evidence of certain events, and the purpose is to reduce fraud, material errors, or unauthorized use, because now you know that from the very beginning till the end what has happened. It helps to enhance internal control and data security. Helps in fixing responsibility, rebuilding events in and thorough analysis of the problem areas. For example, audit trails can track activities of users, thus fixing responsibility. It also helps to rebuild the events upon occurring of some problem. See, you can see now that, okay, this to this has happened. So let us find out where is the problem. Audit trail analysis can specify the reasons of the problem. It can also help in ensuring operation of system as intended. In this way, audit trail helps entities in the regular system operations. Clear? But see, when there is a system of keeping an audit trail, it will involve what? Cost and time. So these are the disadvantages, right? However, use of automated tools can be made to analyze large volume of data thrown up by the audit trails. So the various audit automated tools that are available that can be used, right? Now, what are the benefits to the auditors? So these were the positive points for the organization. These were certain negative points to the for the entity organization. What are the benefits for auditors? See, if audit trail is available, this is the topic. Whose doubt is this? Sukaina, right? Now, systems which have feature of audit trail. So if there is a feature of audit trail, then what will be the benefit? It will inspire the confidence in auditors. It helps auditors in verifying whether controls devised by the management were operating effectively or not. It aids in verification whether a transaction was indeed performed by the person authorized to do it. Since audit trails also enhance data security, these can be used by auditor while performing audit procedures, thus increasing reliability of audit evidence obtained. So what is audit trail? Then what are the various positive points? What are the various negative points? And the benefits of audit trail. Sukaina, is your doubt clear? So if there is audit trail, if there is a feature of, see, this is again one, these trails. If the internal control in the system of the entity is such that it keeps a track of all the things, that is what has happened from the very beginning till the end. This is what implemented by the company. What are the benefits of such a system to the auditor, which is given in the last paragraph? No, it is not, Sukaina. It all depends upon whether the system implemented by the management, whether that system has the feature of audit, keeping a trail, right? Now, when we were discussing about the various sources of audit evidence, we saw that auditor can use the work of management's expert as audit evidence. Now, first of all, let us see who is a management expert. So I am on page number 4.32. An individual or organization possessing expertise in a field other than accounting and auditing. See, accounting, auditing mein to auditor is the expert, na? So in a field other than auditing and accounting, whose work in that field is used by entity to assist the entity in preparing the financial statements. So let's say the work of actuarial service provider is used by any insurance company for the preparation of the financial statements. So an individual or organization possessing the expertise in the field, the actuarial who is having an expertise in the field other than accounting and auditing, or let's say any civil engineer, or let's say any environmental expert, he is having the expertise in the field other than accounting and auditing, whose work in that field is used by the entity to assist the entity in preparing the financial statement is what? Management's expert. Management has used the services of the expert for the preparation of the financial statement. Now, can the auditor use that work as an audit evidence? This is the question. Clear? Is it clear? Now, if the auditor is using the work of management expert, then the nature, timing, and extent of audit procedure may be affected by such matters as. So, what are the factors that are going to affect the nature, timing, extent of the audit procedure when the auditor is using the work of management expert? The nature, complexity of the matter to which the management expert relate, right? The risk of material misstatement. See, higher the risk, auditor is going to increase his work also. Availability of alternate sources of audit evidence. So whether alternate sources of audit evidence are also available. The nature, scope, objectives of management expert work. Whether management expert is employed by the entity or party engaged by it to provide relevant service provider. So is it outsourced or is it within the entity? The extent to which management can exercise control or influence over the work of the management expert. Why? Because it is going to influence the objectivity of the expert. Whether the management expert is subject to technical performance standards. So maybe certain standards are there. So that is going to see if there are certain standards, the quality of the work of the management expert is going to be increased. And thereby, depending upon this, the reliability on the work by the auditor is going to be affected. The nature and extent of any controls within the entity over the management expert work, the auditor's knowledge and experience of the management expert's field or expertise, the auditor's previous experience of that work of the work of that expert. See, let's say the auditor is not able to understand anything about the use of the management expert. So what can auditor do? He may ask another expert in that field to help the auditor. So here, what is happening that let's say any actuarial a person A, he is a civil engineer, he has been appointed by the entity to help the entity in preparing the financial statement. Auditor is not able to understand any work because it is not related to the field of the audit work or the accounting work. What auditor can do, he may appoint Mr. B, who is another civil engineer, and his work is being used by the auditor in order to check the work of the expert, right? Because ultimately, see, the financial statements are prepared either by the management or the expert. Ultimately, the auditor has to give an opinion on the financial statement as a whole. Now, auditor cannot just say that since this work was done by an expert and I had no knowledge, I am not commenting on this. Auditor cannot say that. So, auditor will have to examine the entire financial statement. So, are you able to understand? See, when information to be used as audit evidence has been prepared using the work of management expert, then the nature, timing, extent of audit procedure may be affected by such matters as nature and complexity of matter, risk of material misstatement, availability of alternate source of audit evidence, nature, scope of objective of management expert employed by the entity or outsource, whether entity is having the control, whether there are technical performance standards, controls within the entity over management expert work, auditor's knowledge and experience about the expert's field, and the auditor's previous experience of that work of that expert. See, if the auditor has a previous experience that this work is not relevant, it is not correct. So will auditor use it as an audit evidence? No. So what will auditor do? He'll extend his audit procedures. Now, either he'll check it on his own, or he may take the services of another expert. Simple. Now, students, relating to this is a topic which is what? Relying on the work of management expert. See, I told you that the auditor has to give his opinion on the financial statement as a whole. So, auditor cannot say that since the expert work was used, I am relying on this and I have no responsibility with respect to so and so. So, for example, there are certain calculation with respect to estimates, right? For which the services of any expert has been taken. So auditor cannot say that I am not examining this because this is not in my field. Auditor will have to see now. So before using the work of the management expert, what will auditor do? He will evaluate the competence, capabilities, objectivity of the expert. See, if you are giving an opinion on the financial statement for which the work of some expert has been used, you will see now whether that expert is competent, whether it has the capability and objectivity. That is the independence factor also you are going to see. Obtain an understanding of the work of that expert and evaluate the appropriateness of that expert's work as an audit evidence for the relevant assertion. Simple. Simple. So you may get a 3-mark question that when information to be used at audit evidence has been prepared using the work of management expert, the auditor shall, to the extent necessary, having regard to the significance of the expert's work for the auditor purpose, what shall auditor do? So he will do 3 things, that is evaluate the competence, capabilities, objectivity, obtain an understanding of the work of that expert, and evaluate the appropriateness of expert's work as audit evidence for the relevant assertion. ठीक है students, these topics on page number 4.31 and 30 relating to audit sampling, this I'll be doing when we will be starting with essay 530. This topic on page number paragraph 1.12, please do it as a homework. Inconsistency in or doubt over reliability of audit evidence. So this basically says that if the auditor has obtained an audit evidence which is inconsistent from the other audit evidence, or if he has any doubt over the reliability of any audit evidence, so what will he do? Will he say that I'll not do audit? No. What will he do? He'll modify his audit procedures and he'll consider its effect on the other aspects of audit, right? So he may extend his audit procedures. So you can do this. These topics relating to sampling we will be covering when we will do essay 530. Clear? So we have covered, and this is repetition, evaluation of audit evidence. You can read this as a homework. So a crux of whatever, summary of whatever we have done so far. So we have completed till 4.32 of your module, and now I'll be starting with a very important essay, which is using the work of internal auditors, essay 610. Quickly send in your replies. Is it clear? Whatever we have done so far. So I can see thumbs up from Om Krishna Om, Sukanya, Righosh, Bhumika. Swati, see, students, I have tried to, we have 3 sessions for this chapter, and this is a very important chapter. So you might have found my speed a little bit fast today. Why? Because the topics that we have covered so far, they are really very, very simple, right? And I need to cover all the topics that are given in your chapter. This is nearly around 120-page chapter. So my target is to cover 40 or 42 pages in each session. So that is why. But I hope that the concepts that we have discussed, those are clear to you. Swati, because Swati has said that, ma'am, it was fast today. I know. And intentionally, I have kept that speed like that. So I hope that understanding part, and wherever I have asked you that whether you have learned also, I hope that is clear to all of you. So Swati is saying, yes, ma'am, no worries. Others also please reply. Yes, Kavita is saying, clear, ma'am, we have to go through once. Yes, that though I always ask you to go through the module in entirety. So Om Krishna Om is saying clear. It is also saying it is clear. So that's good. Okay? And you can lower my speed whenever you will be going through this session again. So you can just decrease the speed also. Clear? So let us start with a very important essay, which is what? Using the work of internal auditors. I am on page number 4.33. So essay 610, using the work of internal auditors. Very simple name. So what is an internal audit function? So students, a new essay that has been introduced in this scheme, and a very important essay, because you will see that various small topics are there in this essay, which make a very good question for a 3-mark or a 4-mark question, right? Very good topics are there. And again, very interesting. So Ajay, the answer to your query is no, right? So what is internal audit function? So see, whose responsibility is to create an internal audit function? It is the management's, right? Internal control, one of the parts of internal audit. whose responsibility is to implement internal control? It is the management, not the auditor. So when I say auditor, I'll be saying what? External auditor. And when I have to say internal auditor, I'll specifically mention internal auditor. Otherwise, auditor means what? Statutory or the external auditor. Clear? Right? So the internal audit function is the function of an entity that performs assurance, consulting activities designed to evaluate and improve effectiveness of three things: entity's governance, how the entity has been governed, the operations are organized; risk management; and internal control processes. So internal audit function is the function of an entity that performs assurance and consulting activities designed to evaluate and improve effectiveness of entities' governance. Governance is what? The way the organization is controlled. है the way the organization is, the work of the organization is directed, right? Risk management and internal control processes. So this is a function by the entity relating to three activities. What are these? We have discussed. Now let us see that when we say which performs the assurance and consulting activities relating to entities governance, risk management, internal control processes. So what are such activities? So activities relating to governance. See, what is meant by governance? It basically means how the entity is been controlled. The organization has been controlled. How the control and direction of the entity is happening, right? So governance, right? Your ethics, the value, the performance monitoring, everything is included in governance. So what will be the various activities? So see, ultimately, see, the internal audit function may assess the governance process in its accomplishment of objectives on ethics, values, performance management, accountability, communicating risk and control information to appropriate areas, and the communication between those charged with governance, external auditors, internal auditors, and the management. So the internal audit function is that of the entity, and why entity has implemented an internal audit function? To perform various activities relating to what? Governance. So activities relating to the ethics, values, the performance management, accountability, communication of risk and control information to appropriate areas. Then the effectiveness of communication among those charged with governance, internal auditor, external auditor, and management. All these activities will be part of what? Internal audit function. Clear? Then activities relating to risk management. So internal audit function will perform activities for identifying and identifying and evaluating the significant exposure to risk, improvement of risk management and internal control, and will assist the entity in detection of fraud. See, fraud is again a risk associated with the entity. So internal audit function may perform procedure to assist the entity in the detection of frauds. So internal audit function belongs to that of the entity. Why? In order to provide assurance and perform assurance and consulting activities relating to what? Evaluation and improving effectiveness of entities governance that we have seen, risk management, and the last is what? Internal control processes. So the various activities of internal audit function relating to internal control is what? First of all, evaluation of internal control, then examination of financial and operating information, reviewing the operating activities, and review of compliance with laws and regulations. Clear? Let me just discuss this in detail with you from the module. We are on page number 4.33. So activities relating to internal control. So evaluation of internal control. Then you have examination of financial and operating information, review of operating activities, and review of compliance with law and regulation. See, internal audit function will review the internal control, right? So it will review the control, then it will evaluate its operation, the operation of internal control, and in case any improvement is to be recommended, the internal audit function will recommend the same. So these are the activities of the internal audit function with respect to evaluation of internal control. The internal audit function may be assigned specific responsibility for reviewing control, evaluating their operation, and recommending them improvements. In doing so, the internal audit function provides assurance on the control, whether that control is operating, and in case of any improvement is to be recommended, the same will be done by the internal audit function. Examination of financial and operating information. So another, the activities relating to examination of financial and operating information performed by internal audit function can be, it will see as to how the entity identifies, recognize, measure, classify, and report the financial and operating information. And it will make specific inquiries if required with respect to individual items or testing the transactions, balances, or procedures. That is basically with respect to financial and operating information. The entity's process to identify, recognize, measure, classify, and report on the financial statement. Review of operating activities. Another important aspect with respect to the internal control is review of operating activities. So the internal audit function will check what? It will review the economy, efficiency, and effectiveness of the operating activities of the company, including the non-financial one. Review of compliance with laws and regulations. The internal audit function may be assigned to review the compliance with laws and regulations, both external as well as internal management policies and directives. Simple. So you may get a 4-mark question that what are the activities relating to the internal control with what are the activities of internal audit function with respect to the internal control. So this is what evaluation of internal control, your examination of financial and operating information, review of operating activities, and review of compliance with laws and regulations. Clear? Now, see ways in which external auditor may make use of internal audit function for the purpose of this audit. See, just try to understand. See, let's say this is ABC Limited. Now the management, or you can say those charged with governance also, they are responsible for having an internal audit function. And we have seen that the internal audit function will see the governance, the risk management, and the internal control of the organization. Now, when the internal audit function is working on all these areas and it is giving its reports, recommendation to the management. So now, why is this essay? This essay says whether the external auditor can use the work of internal audit function. If yes, how? To what extent? And what are the areas where external auditor cannot use the work of the internal audit functions? So this is basically what we are going to read in essay 610. Okay? So we have, abhi tak we have understood what is internal audit function and we have understood about various activities. Okay? Now the next topic is ways in which the external auditor may make use of internal audit function for the purpose of this audit. I hope you are getting as to what we are going to study in this essay. Quickly send in your replies. Abhi tak whatever we have done in this essay 610, is it clear or not? Quickly send in your replies. Students, this is a really very, very important essay. So Komalpreet, Rik Ghosh, Swati, Sukaina, Ajay Chaudhary, they are saying yes, ma'am, it is clear. Bhumika. See, the external auditor, when he uses the work of internal audit function, he may use it for 3 purposes. For identifying and assessing the risk of material misstatement, assessing the risk of material misstatement. So he may use the work of the internal audit function for that. He may decide to use the work performed by the internal audit function, or he may decide to use the internal auditor under direction, supervision, review of the external auditor, that is direct assistant. So what is this? So basically, we want to say that the external auditor, he may use the work of the internal audit function to obtain the information with respect to what? Assessment of risk of material misstatement. He can inquire with the internal auditors, okay, tell me what are the risks associated with this organization, right? He may use such information in assessing the risk of material misstatement, right? Then students, you are going to see that this entire essay is divided into two parts, whereby it says that the external auditor may use the internal audit function, the work of internal audit function. This is one aspect. And the second is what? The external auditor may use internal auditors to perform certain audit procedures. So here, what is happening in the second point? The external auditor is using the work that has been performed or that will be performed by the internal audit function. So the work has been done by them, external auditor is using them, that work. In the third point, the external auditor is asking the internal auditors to perform certain audit procedures, that is using their direct assistance. See, you all know that when the auditor has to give the opinion, he himself is responsible. It is the sole responsibility of the external auditor, right? So when he is using the direct assistant, there need to be DSR, that is direction, supervision, and review of the work done by internal auditors. By whom? The external auditor. Clear? So we have seen that the external auditor may make use in the following ways, that is to obtain information relevant for external auditors' assessment of risk of material misstatement. Then two things can be what? If it is not prohibited by law, the external auditor may decide to use the work performed by internal audit function. So work has been performed or it has been planned to be performed, and that work is been used by the external auditor. Or the third point says that if it is not prohibited by law or regulation, it may use the internal auditor. Auditor को ही internal auditor को ही external auditor is going to ask them to perform certain audit procedure, but yes, under the direction, supervision, review of the external auditor, which is what? Direct assistance. So this is the paragraph 2.2 which we are just doing, that external auditor may make the use of function of for the purposes of audit in one or more of the following ways: to obtain information that is relevant for auditor's assessment of risk of material misstatement. Second, unless prohibited or restricted to some extent by law or regulation, the external auditor, after appropriate evaluation, may decide to use the work that has been performed by internal audit function during the period in partial substitution for audit evidence to be obtained directly by the external auditor. अभी स्वाति वेट फॉर अभी रुको पहले try to understand, then we'll discuss. Unless prohibited, restricted to some extent by law regulation, the external auditor may use internal auditors. Here it is not mentioned work, it is mentioned what? Internal auditors, to perform audit procedure under the direction, supervision, review of the external auditor, known as what? Direct assistance. Okay, so how is this essay given? Certain common things are given in the earlier stages, and then a division is given that if the external auditor is using the work of the internal audit function, or second is what? Direct assistance. ठीक है? Clear? Three ways are clear? ठीक है? Now what is the scope of this essay? So it deals with the external auditor's responsibility if using the work of internal auditors, that is whether using the work of internal audit function or direct assistance. Simple. Okay. Now, what is the responsibility of the external auditor? Who is responsible? So external auditor has the sole responsibility for the audit opinion, and that responsibility is not reduced by the external auditor use of the work of the internal auditors, be it internal audit function or the direct assistance. So the external auditor cannot say, I relied on the work of the internal auditor, now there is a mistake on that work, so I am not responsible. Nahi. Audit, see who is signing the audit report? It is the external auditor. Now his signatures, his membership number is going to come. So he is responsible for the entire audit report. So it is his responsibility whether he relies or not, or whether he, if in case he uses the work, then whether it is using the work of the internal audit function or using the direct assistance. Okay? Right? Is it clear? And also, students, when the auditor is using the work of the internal auditors, the external auditor needs to keep in mind that, see, internal audit function is a function of the entity. They are not independent of the management or the entity now. So independence needs to be seen as per SA 200. So SA 600, it defines necessary condition for external auditor to be able to use the work of internal auditors. Also, SA 610 defines necessary work effort to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence of the work of internal auditor to see whether it is adequate for the purpose of the audit. Further, it provides the framework for external auditors' judgment regarding the use of internal auditors in order to prevent or undue use of such work. See, what is it saying? In simple language, it says that it is the sole responsibility of the external auditor whether he uses the internal audit function or he uses the internal auditors, that is direct assistance. Also, the fact that the internal audit function or the internal auditors, they are not independent of the entity. And where is independence requirement given? It is given in SA 200. SA 200 में independence के बारे में बात किया हुआ है ना? We have discussed that in chapter number 1 also. So SA 610, it defines that certain necessary conditions are there based on which the auditor may use the work of the internal auditors. What are those? We will be discussing. Further, see, before using the work of the internal audit function or before using the internal auditors, external auditor will see now that whether that work is appropriate or not, or whether the internal auditors are competent enough or not. So this second point is talking about that. And the third point is saying there is a framework which the external auditor needs to consider. Otherwise, there can be what? Over or undue use of such work, right? So where is all this given? This is given in SA 610, right? What is the objective of external auditor where entity has internal audit function? See, he will determine. So what is the objective as per SA 610? It is that the external auditor will determine whether work of internal audit function can be used, in which areas, to what extent. See, all this is what mentioned above, that there is a framework to prevent over or undue use of such work. So first of all, the objective is whether that work can be used, which areas, to what extent, whether the work is adequate or not, and whether that work is adequate for the purpose of audit. And in case of direct assistant, auditor is going to do what? DSI, direction, review and supervision. Simple. So for what are the objectives? First is to determine whether the work of internal audit function can be used, in which area, to what extent. Secondly, if using now the auditor has decided, okay, the work is appropriate. He can use it in two ways. First is using the work of internal audit function. So whether that is adequate for his purposes or not. Or direct assistance. So in that case, DSR will be done. Simple. Now, how is the external auditor going to evaluate the internal audit function? So three aspects should be there which the external auditor is going to see. See, this is what is mentioned here, na? That there will be necessary work that the external auditor needs to perform in order to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence that the work is adequate or not, right? So that is what we are going to study. So evaluation of internal audit function, auditor is going to see three things: objectivity of internal auditors, whether they can be honest or not; competence level of internal audit function, and whether The internal audit function applies systematic, disciplined approach, including quality control. See, if all these things are there, then only auditor will decide to either use the internal audit function or to use the direct assistance. Clear? Hai? So how will he evaluate? By checking the objectivity of internal auditors, competence level of internal audit function, whether internal audit function applies a systematic, disciplined approach, including quality control. Clear? Now, further, there is an explanation of various factors that the auditor will see when he's considering objectivity, when he's considering competence level, and when he's considering whether the internal audit function is systematic, disciplined approach, including the quality control. Let us do this topic from module page number 4.37. So when the auditor has to check, external auditor has to check about the objectivity of the internal audit function. See, what is meant by objectivity? So basically the ability of the function, internal audit function, to perform those tasks without allowing bias, conflict of interest, undue influence of others to override the professional judgments. So basically to act with honesty, to act with independence. So this is objectivity. Now, when the external auditor is evaluating about the objectivity of internal audit functions, what are the various factors that he's going to consider? What are the various factors that he's going to consider? So, first of all, he'll consider the organizational status of internal audit function. The organizational status. See, what is the status of the function, internal audit function, or I can say the internal audit department. So whether they have the authority, responsibility that allows them to act objectively or not. Okay? Then who is taking the employment decisions relating to internal audit function? Is it those charged with governance? So whether those charged with governance oversee employment decisions relating to the internal audit function. Clear? The third point, are there any constraints or restrictions on the internal audit function by management or those charged with governance? It might be possible that management, those charged with governance have asked the internal audit department that they will not communicate with the external auditors, right? And last, are there any conflicting responsibilities of the internal audit function? For example, internal audit function. For example, the internal audit department is also looking after some managerial or operational activities. So conflicting interest, why? Because they are performing internal audit function. They are doing managerial and operational activities also. So auditor is going to consider all these 4 points when he have to see the objectivity. See, if the person himself is doing some work, himself is checking, the objectivity, independence is not going to come. Na? Same way, if there are any constraints on the restriction or constraints or restrictions on the function by the management or those charged with governance, objectivity is going to be hampered. See, employment decision, na? Who is going to employ the internal audit function? Again, objectivity is going to be influenced. And the first point was organizational status. I hope it is clear. What is it? Objectivity. Then is with respect to competence. So what is meant by competence is refer to the attainment, maintenance of knowledge and skills of the function as a whole at a level required to enable assigned tasks to be performed diligently and in accordance with the applicable professional standards. So basically, whether the internal audit function has the requisite skills and knowledge or not, right? So what are the various factors? Again, whether the internal audit function is adequately and appropriately resourced. That is, the team has is adequate and appropriate. Whether there are policies for hiring, training, and assigning of internal audit engagement to the internal auditors. Whether there is adequate arrangements of providing training and proficiency in auditing to the internal audit function. See, agar training and proficiency hai, competence level is going to be high. If there are policies of hiring, training, and assigning the internal auditors to the internal audit engagements. So as per the internal audit engagement, let's say the internal audit engagement is with respect to the operation department or the production department or the finance department, and the requisite training is given. So competence level are going to be high. And whether the internal audit function have the knowledge about the financial reporting and the applicable FRF. So again, the competence level. And this paragraph says that the objectivity and competence are to be seen simultaneously in continuation. So it cannot happen that objectivity is there, competence is not there, or vice versa. So if objectivity is also there, competence is also there, obviously the reliance of the external auditor is going to be more. Simple, very logical. Now, when the third point was what? Systematical and disciplined approach. What we were discussing, when the auditor has to use, external auditor has to use the function of internal audit, then he will see three things: objectivity, competence, systematic, disciplined approach. With respect to objectivity, we have seen 4 points. With respect to competence also, we have seen, I think, 4 points only. Yes. And now with respect to this systematic approach, there are 2 points. So systematic and disciplined approach, including quality control. Just a minute. So here, the factors that are going to affect the external auditor's determination of whether the internal audit function applies a systematic and disciplined approach, including the following. So what are these? The existence, adequacy, use of documented internal control procedures and guidance. So whether there is documentation, whether there is guidance with respect to risk assessment, work programs, documentation, reporting, nature and extent of work. So documentation hai ya nahi, and then whether there is appropriate quality control policies and procedures that the internal audit function, whether it has that appropriate quality control policies and procedures. If it is documented, if there is a guidance, if there are appropriate quality control procedures, then auditor is going to determine what? That yes, internal audit function is systematic in approach and has a system of quality control. Clear? Are these topics clear? Now, circumstances when the work of internal auditor function cannot be used. See, here what you have done, when it can be used, when there is objectivity, when there is competence, when there is systematic and disciplined approach. So when it cannot be used, when there is these things are missing. Either of these things are missing. So the auditor shall not use the work of internal audit function. So abhi we are not saying that whether direct assistance lena hai work. Abhi we are talking general. If the external auditor determines that the objectivity is not there, the competence is not there, or the systematic approach is not there. Very simple. ठीक है? Is it clear? So the next is what? Determining the nature and extent. See students, when we were doing this topic here, which is marked in purple, we have seen that SA 610 provides a guideline that what are the conditions necessary so as to use the work. What is the necessary work effort that the external auditor should do? What is the framework? So SA 610 provides all that, and that is what we are studying. So we have done objectives, evaluation of all these things, and when to not use the work, when there is no objectivity, no competence, no systematic or disciplined approach. And if you will see, these are what connected by or. If either of these are missing, so it cannot happen. Objectivity to hai, systematic and disciplined hai, but competence nahi hai, so auditor is using it. So if either of these are missing, auditor is not going to use it, right? Now, when the auditor has to determine the nature, extent of work of internal audit function that can be used. So first of all, the external auditor will consider the nature and scope of the work that has been performed by internal audit function or that is planned to be performed by the internal audit function. See, to what extent to rely? What is the nature of the work on which the auditor can rely? First of all, external auditor will see now what is the nature and scope of the work of the internal audit function, right? Certain examples are given in your book, which again form a very good 3 mark or 4 mark question. Examples of work of internal audit function that can be used by external auditors, including the following. So what kind of work of internal audit function can be used by the external auditors? So when the external auditor is testing the operating effectiveness of control, he may use the work which has already been planned or which has already been performed or planned to be performed by the internal audit function. है ना? Substantive procedure involving limited judgment. See where excessive judgments are required. If you remember, we have done that this becomes a significant risk area. So यहाँ पर तो auditor is going to increase his checking on his own. ना? He will not rely as such on internal audit function. So where substantive procedures, the checking are to be done which involve limited judgment. Clear? Observation of inventory count. See, इधर तो internal audit function पे auditor can use this work. Tracing transaction through information system relevant to financial reporting. Testing the compliance with regulatory requirements. So if these are the cases, here, these are basically the examples of internal audit function that can be used by the external auditor as per SA 610. ठीक है? So what we have done so far? We have started our essay with the definition of internal audit function. And then activities relating to governance, risk management, internal control processes. I told you may get a straightforward 4-mark question with respect to, let's say, internal control activities relating to internal control. So it will have evaluation of internal control, examination of financial and operating information, review of operating activities, and review of compliance with laws and regulation. The explanation we have done from the module. Okay? Then ways in which it can be used for assessing the risk of material misstatement, using the work of the internal audit function or direct assistance. But whenever direct assistance will be there, that is using the internal auditors, not internal audit function, but auditors. Then there will be what? DSR, direction, review, and supervision, right? Scope says that external auditors' responsibility with respect to using the work of internal audit function or direct assistance. Responsibility is that of the internal auditor. Yes, as and why? Because he has the sole responsibility for his opinion. Further, internal auditor or the internal audit function is not independent of the entity. So SS 610 states what are the conditions necessary where you can use, what are the necessary effort that the external auditor needs to make, what is the frame of reference, framework of external auditor's judgment regarding the use of the internal auditor so as to prevent any over or undue usage. What is the objective of the external auditor? First of all, to see whether it can be used or not, in which areas, to what extent. Having determined that, whether internal audit function is adequate or not, and thirdly, if using the direct assistant, then DSR करना है. Evaluation of internal audit function, objectivity देखना है, competence level देखना है, systematic disciplined approach including quality control. If any of these things is missing, then he will not rely or he will not use the work of the internal audit function. Now, when the auditor is, external auditor is evaluating objectivity, competence, and application of systematic and disciplined approach, we have seen this from the module, and this again forms a very good 3-mark or 4-mark question individually. Okay? Circumstances we have seen. Now, when the auditor is determining the nature and extent of internal audit function, first of all, he'll see what is the nature and scope of the work that the internal audit function has performed or is going to perform, and the various example where the internal audit function can generally be used by the external auditor are what? Testing the operating effectiveness of control, substantive procedures where limited judgment is involved, observation of inventory count, tracing transactions through the information system relevant to financial reporting, and testing of compliance with regulatory requirements. Students, please send in your replies. Swati, you also reply whether whatever we have done so far is clear to you or not. Your doubt I'll take up later. Otherwise, please reply. So all of you are saying clear. See, what are the circumstances in which external auditor shall plan to use less work? See, where external auditor will not use is what? जहां objectivity नहीं है, competence नहीं है, या आपका systematic discipline approach नहीं है, right? less work, circumstances in which EA, external auditor, shall plan to use less work. So first of all, where significant judgments are involved, in that area, in that circumstance, the external auditor will prevent undue use of internal audit function. Simple hai. So EA shall make all significant judgments to prevent undue use of internal audit function. Where more judgment is involved, like in planning and performing the relevant audit procedure, in evaluating the audit evidence, EA will use less work of internal audit function. Where there is higher assessed risk of material misstatement, logical. Where there is no objectivity of internal audit function, logical. Where there is less competence of internal audit function, logical. Simple. So EA will make all significant judgments on its own to prevent undue use of internal audit function. Wherever more judgment is required in planning, performing relevant audit procedure, evaluating the audit evidence obtained, the less work will be used of internal audit function. Higher assessed risk of material misstatement, objectivity nahi hai ya level of competence kam hai, there also less work of internal audit function will be used. We are doing this topic. This is paragraph number what? 2.9 on page number 4.40. Clear? Clear? Now, see, abhi tak I told you that till this topic was what? Common points. Now comes two different things, that is using the work of internal audit function or direct assistance. So your paragraph number 2.10 on page number 4.40 is using the work of internal audit function, and your paragraph number 2.11 on page number 4.42 is what? Your direct assistance. Clear hai? Samajh aa raha hai na how the flow is going? Now, when the auditor is using the work of internal audit function, ठीक है? So, अभी we have seen कब use करना है, कब नहीं करना. Now, auditor has decided that he is going to use the internal audit function that has been done or that is planned to be done. So, whatever work has been done by the internal audit function, he is going to use. See, very logical, na? So, when the auditor decides to use the work, first of all, he will discuss with the internal audit department. He'll discuss the planned use of its work with the function. With the function means the internal audit function as a basis for coordinating their respective activities. Simple. Planned use. Why? In order to discuss what? Basis for coordinating the respective activities. Very simple, na? Then, whatever are the reports of the internal audit function, the external auditor is going to read all such reports, and that the external auditor plans to use to obtain an understanding of the nature and extent of the audit procedure it performed and related findings. So the report of the internal audit function with respect to the work that external auditor plans to use. Why? So as to obtain an understanding of what kind of audit procedure. See, internal audit department is also going to perform what? Audit procedures and the related findings. So first of all, discuss kya karna hai, what is the planned user work so that coordination of activities can be done. Then read the reports with respect to the areas where you want to use the internal audit function. See, if auditor decides that with respect to sales, I'm not going to use the internal audit function, so will he read that report? No. Okay? And in order to understand the nature, extent of audit procedures performed and the related findings. And last but not the least is what? Perform sufficient procedures on the body of the work of internal audit function as a whole that external auditor plans to use to determine the adequacy. So, see, you are using the work, but we have seen the sole responsibility is that of the external auditor. So, external auditor will have to obtain sufficient audit evidence that the work of the internal audit function is adequate for the purpose of the audit. Simple. So first is was discuss the planned use of work for coordinating the respective activities. Read the reports with respect to the areas where the auditor plans to use the work so as to obtain understanding of the nature, extent of audit procedure of internal audit function and the related finding. And last, now you have decided that this is the area I'm going to use the work. This is the reports that I have gone through. perform certain procedures with respect to that work also, na? ऐसे ही थोड़ा ना blindly you will rely. You are an expert, you are giving an expert opinion. Is it clear? Now, when we say discussion and coordination of respective activities, so with respect to with respect to this, what discussions can take place between the external auditor and the internal audit function? This is the next topic. So basically, an explanation of point number A. So discussion and coordination can be timing of the work, nature of the work performed, extent of coverage. So I can say the nature, time, extent. NTE we always discuss. So nature, time, extent of the work performed or the audit coverage. Materiality. See, these topics are so simple. And performance materiality levels. Proposed methods for sample selection. Documentation of the work performed. Review and reporting procedures. Simple. And coordination. So these were the discussions with respect to what? Timings of the work, nature of the work performed, extent of audit procedure. So nature, timing, extent. Nature, timing, extent. Kavita, is it clear? Right? So this was the discussion. And coordination between the external auditor and internal audit function is going to be effective when? Now this is the next topic. Okay? So it says that coordination between the external auditor and internal audit function is going to be effective if, see, very logical, na? See, you can be coordinated when there will be what? Discussions throughout the period. Okay? So internal audit function and external auditor coordination kab hoega? First of all, discussions should be there throughout the period at appropriate interval. Okay? Secondly, if external auditor becomes aware about any significant matter that affects the internal audit function, the external auditor needs to communicate it to internal audit function. And the third point is just vice versa of this. That if the internal audit department function, it becomes aware about any matter which is significant to external auditor, the same should be reported. As simple as that. So let us just read. Coordination between internal auditor and internal audit function is effective when the discussions take place at appropriate intervals. So discussions होने चाहिए. Appropriate intervals पे होने चाहिए. Throughout the audit period होने चाहिए. The external auditor informs the internal audit function of significant matters. So here that may affect the function. Function is what? Internal audit function. And the third point is just opposite of that. The external auditor is advised of have access to the relevant reports of internal audit function. And so third point consists of 2 points. That reports of internal audit function should be made available plus communication, that is, he is informed of significant matters that come to the attention of function when such matters may affect the work of the external auditor, so that external auditor is able to consider implication of such matters for the audit engagement. As simple as that. Okay? Quickly send in your replies. Is it clear? Is it clear? Okay. Now a very small topic is left, which is what? Paragraph number 2.11 on page number 4.42. That is when the auditor is using the internal auditors, that is direct assistance. So I told you directly you are assisting. So first of all, direction, supervision and review should be there by the external auditor. You are asking the internal auditors to perform certain audit procedures for you. You are using the internal auditors here. So it should be under the direction, supervision, review of the internal or external auditor. See, it may be prohibited by law. And if it is the same is not prohibited by law, an auditor plans to use the direct assistance. First of all, external auditor will evaluate the existence and significance again with respect to threat of objectivity and competence. ये तो सब check करना ही पड़ेगा ना, objectivity है या नहीं, competence है या नहीं, right? And the external auditor shall not use the internal auditors as direct assistance if there is no objectivity, there is no competence. Simple repetition है ना. And the external auditor shall not use the work of internal audit. The external auditor shall not use internal auditors where there are what significant judgments involved, high risk of material misstatement, where the work of internal auditor is to be reviewed. See, internal auditor cannot be asked to review their own work, na? So relate to the work with which internal auditors have been involved, right? And relate to the decision the external auditor makes in accordance with SA 610. See, external auditor will not ask internal audit function that please tell me whether I can use your work or should I use direct assistance. So this is to be determined by the external auditor. Simple. So jahan pe significant judgments are involved, risk of material misstatement is high, where the work of internal auditor is to be reviewed, and where under this essay it is to be decided whether to use the internal audit function or use the work as direct assistance. Clear? And see, two agreements are to be signed. If you are the external auditor, you have decided to use the internal audit function. First of all, an agreement will be signed with the entity, written agreement that entity, we will please allow the internal auditors to follow our instructions and you will not intervene, right? Another agreement will be with the internal auditors that you will maintain what confidentiality aspect. Simple. So a 3-mark question or a 4-mark question with the explanation. So obtain written agreement from authorized representative of the entity that the internal auditors will be allowed to follow the external auditor instruction and that the entity will not intervene in the work of the internal auditor performs for external auditor, and obtain written agreement from the internal auditors that they will keep confidential specific matters as instructed by external auditor and inform the external auditor of any threat of objectivity. So with this, we have completed essay 610. I'm telling you again and again, very, 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 very important. Okay. So like 3 or 4 mark direct question can be asked. You will be given a situation and direct questions, beautiful questions can be framed from this topic. The topic of this on page number 4.43, paragraph number 2.12, that is basis of internal financial control and reporting requirements. Though we have discussed this in chapter number 3 also, so I'll give you to do this as a homework. So we have done this topic in entirety till page number 4.43, except for certain topics relating to sampling that I'll be taking up when we'll be doing essay Y30. But before coming for the next session, I'll repeat here, students, please go through this chapter till page number 4.43. And I'm repeating again, essay 610, very, 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 very important and very easy. If you just open your mind now, just try to have a picture as to what you are discussing in this essay. So few paragraphs are there which are common, and then we have two bifurcation, that is when the internal audit function is being used or when the direct assistance is been there. And with respect to direct assistance, there will be what? Direction, supervision and review. So I hope whatever we have done so far is clear. I've already taken your 7-8 minutes extra. So in case of any doubt, you can always send, and now we'll meet for the second session of this chapter whenever is your next scheduled sessions, right? But before coming for the next session, please go through the module. Yes, I'll try to cover the entire chapter, Rick Ghosh. I'll try to cover that. That is why I've maintained a little bit fast speed for this session today, right? So thank you. And in case of any queries, please send in your queries if I have missed any of yours query. So Swati, please send in your query in the next session, right? So thank you and bye-bye and happy learning and happy reading. Thank you.